Welcome back, guys. It's White Dev again, and today we're going to talk about a little more on your vendors and how to actually enter a bill for them, an expense for your vendors. Now, ideally, you are operating out of QuickBooks Online from the front side instead of from the back side. What you don't want to do is you do not want to just solely operate off of bank feeds, because it does work, but you're still not as in tune with your business as possible. Maybe in the beginning when it seems overwhelming, or maybe when you've got things plugging away and doing it, then you can come into the bank feeds and have that be your sole source of how you set things up. But setting up from the beginning is going to be the most ideal way to do that. And as you teach yourself what to do inside your business, it's going to be that much more relevant for you to understand what the picture is as you're going through and setting this up, because then you do not have to worry about your bank feed and your reconciliation as much, because this information is going to come through and pair with it. So you're going to have it in there, your receipt bank's going to tie in, your bank feed's going to tie in, and it's done. You are completed, and you do not have to have any more information thrown in. Now, because that would be, let me back that up a little bit, that would be when you have an account that does not utilize Receipt Bank the same way that we do inside our system here in the membership. So because you have Receipt Bank actually automatically enters this vendor information for you, or ties in with the vendor information you have, because again, your Receipt Bank is intuitive and it's linked with your QuickBooks Online. So if you have the vendors already established, it's going to be in your Receipt Bank. If you do not have the vendor established, you have the opportunity on the Receipt Bank level to create the vendor, and then it will push that data into QuickBooks Online. So you don't necessarily have to come in here and set up the vendor that way. Now, let's go ahead and enter an actual bill, because this will give you an idea of how the bill section works. When you come into here, you're under the expenses and we're under vendors. You come in and you see this bar up here. This bar actually tells you a lot of information, and it is clickable. So what happens is this is saying that unpaid, that's overdue in the last 365 days, the dollar amount, and the quantity of invoice or bills that are unpaid. Then this has the open bills that are sitting open but not overdue yet, and then this shows you, the green shows what you have paid for the last 30 days. So let's go ahead and enter a bill for the USPS. There's multiple ways that you can go in here and do that. You can go into expenses and add an expense, or you can come up here and add an expense, and that'll give you a blank screen. But I'm going to go back to the vendors, and I'm actually going to open up the vendor, because up in here you can enter an expense or a bill, and it's going to pre-populate with that automatic information that you've already set up when you set the vendor up. So this is my preferred method, because that way I don't have to enter as much information. This is saying the vendor's name, and remember, we had it show up as Joe Smith, the name, instead of the United States Post Office when we created the vendor. Over here we have the bank account that is being drawn from, the payment date, and if you established when setting up the vendor what the payment terms are going to be. Then you have also your payment method, cash, check, or credit card. So let's just say this was credit card. Over here you have a reference number. What I normally put in this expense as a reference number is going to be the invoice, or not the invoice, the actual reference transaction. So this expense, let's differentiate this, an expense versus a bill. An expense is when it's an automatic, 99.9% of the time, it's when it's done right on the spot, it's through a credit card. Now, this is not going to have payment terms, because these were immediate transactions. This is the equivalent of a sales receipt versus an invoice. It is an immediate transaction that happened right at that moment. The bills or the invoices usually have payable terms, so they hold out a little bit longer, and those ones will have the payment terms on it. But we're saying that this is an expense that's immediate, and then we'll go in and put a bill after that. So right here I'm going to say this is postage, And you'll notice that I don't have a postage and delivery account. So with that in mind, this pops up multiple times. Go ahead and hit add. It's going to bring us to the screen to add this item. It is an expense. And we want to find a detail type that closely matches what we're doing here. The first thought as I scroll through here is that it would be shipping, freight, and delivery. But shipping, freight, and delivery is much more relative to when it's sending a large item, not maybe stamps or postage or small regular office transactions. So because I know this is just mailing a letter, I'm going to say office and general administrative expenses. I do not want a sub-account under anything. Save and close. Now I can send a description or set a description for this expense. Be like, let's see. And I'm going to put $10. So then I go over here if I want to add any memo, any transaction information, if I want to add an attachment. Now the attachment side of it, when we run Receipt Bank, because of our process, this is where it actually already attaches for us. So it will run that through and create that transaction. So that's the benefit of having this system set up, is that Receipt Bank already does so much of this transaction for you. But I wanted to add these so that you had the opportunity to manually add vendors or manually add expenses or manually add bills. So let's go over here and save and close. But I also want to go up here and actually enter a bill. So this way, you can see that the information still pre-populates, gives me all the information I'm asking for, terms, because we did give the USPS a specific set of terms. We had a bill date, and now it shows, because those terms, the due date. The bill number is the invoice number that they assigned with the invoice so that it's documented. Down here, we're also going to say postage and delivery. We're going to say that this is for bubble mailers. We're going to say it's $25. Save and close. And there you have it. So with those, this leaves it open under the USPS how we are able to record keep for the post office. So the expense, again, is an immediate transaction. It's going to populate that on the other side of that transaction to the account that you said it would come out of. It will automatically send it there. So that register is going to have the opposite side of the transaction. Remember, your transactions are two-sided. Again, a form of accounting in the United States is a two-sided transaction. So when you enter an expense or when you enter a bill, it goes, the opposite transaction goes somewhere else as well. That's why setting up is imperatively necessary for you to have right, because it can go to the other side that you may not know where it goes. So we have this. Expenses go directly to the item, or I'm sorry, to the account right here. This is the account that it goes to. A bill will go to accounts payable. It will go up here just like it did for Receipt Bank, and it will sit here until it has the opposite transaction to pull it away from there into the account that it was meant to come out of. Receipt Bank is the one that pulls it from accounts payable. It enters it and pulls it from there and puts it into the account that it goes to, that it actually populated from. But when we do an expense, it does not do that same type of transaction. So if we were to change this bill amount, I want to show you something here. And this is how it will zero out all the way around. This is a little extra on this tutorial. So we have the expense that came in and the bill that we entered. So say we went ahead and took the information, put it in as an expense, but we also, Receipt Bank also came through as a bill. It's very simple. We just open the expense and it says, hey, guess what? You've got a bill for the exact same amount for, actually, it doesn't even have to be the exact same amount. It could be any amount, but it asks you, it wants you to know, you've got an outstanding bill for this vendor. Does any of it apply here? And that's where you get the opportunity to say, oh, actually, it does. So then you go in, you type $10 as the amount to verify, save and close. And as you'll notice, that turns this expense into the payment for that bill, which is accurate. If we open up our pay bills, it clears that out as well. Now let's go back over to expenses, and you will see that we had one paid bill last 30 days. We just paid that bill. If I take this here, I'm doing this for an example for you. I'm going to delete that bill because now we put this payment, or this, I'm deleting the payment, the expense. So now we're putting this bill back in an open category. So if we go back to expenses, it says we have one open bill that it needs to be paid, and we click on it and it shows us, and we can click on the bill. If we have a due date that we changed to the 1st, save and close. It adjusts all the information on there, and then we go to expenses. We can go ahead and say this bill is due. Now the reason this doesn't come through as an overdue bill is because it's not technically due yet. Remember, we have a net 15. So once it hits that 6/16 date on this, the calendar, then this due date will push it automatically into the overdue section. So it's intuitive and watches that area. I hope that was helpful for you, and I hope you're able to follow along and be that much more confident in your vendors and your bills and how the receipt bank ties in and what you need to do to create them. Again, if you have any further questions, send a Slack message or plan to jump into one of the virtual office hours. I will talk to you soon.